Hello y'all, this is Silenx and you're watching SilenxScripts. In today's video, we're going to be solving a logical problem that you might get in your exam if you're in a college or university. I don't really know, I'm 16. So I just googled it and I found that colleges do give these kind of logical problems. Anyway, so we're gonna be solving one of them, which is how to get factorial of a given number. Now, if you don't know what a factorial means, it basically means like a number multiplied by all its natural predecessors. Like if I have to get 5 factorial, then it will be equal to 5 into 4 into 3 into 2, and not 1, because if I multiply this thing with 1 it will come the same anyway. So we're going to be making a program to get the factorial, to get the answer of the factorial of a number. Now I'm going to do this in 4 different languages. If you want to be in a specific language, then timestamps are given in the description. Otherwise, let me explain. First, I'm going to explain this thing, and I'm going to explain how factorial, like recursion of functions work. I'm going to explain that in C, because I think most of the people who are in college will be doing this using C. So I'm going to explain everything in C. Then I'm going to show you like pre-written code in Java, JavaScript, and Python, and then going to explain the same thing in them as well. So without any further ado, let's build our C program first. And if you want to get any specific language, then saying this second time, I guess. The timestamps are in description. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. I've already done quite delay. So I'm gonna just do simple C boilerplate, include studio h, and then int main this function. Okay, so now you can get a factorial using for loops and using recursive functions. Now, most of the time, the question you'll get will be they will be telling you that get the factorial. They won't tell you if you have to use for loop or if you have to use recursive functions. Now, let me tell you, using recursive functions, you can get it quite easily. For loop just makes it difficult. So yeah, I'm gonna be showing it to you in the recursive function way. Now, what do I mean by recursing? Yeah, recursing, maybe. It's recursing, okay. So what recursing function means is if I expect you to know the programming language a little bit, because I'm not gonna explain the very basics. So I'm gonna make a function here, factorial, and then it will take int I as a parameter. I still expect you to know a little bit of coding. I mean, you should if you're given an exam. broken humor of mine. Anyway, I'm gonna make the same function. Let me check the spelling. Yes, it's the same. Int a. Not gonna confuse you. Int I. And then this is the actual factorial function. The actual factorial function is pretty easy. Now, I was going to tell you what recursive functions actually mean. This video is going to be long because I'm going to give you a proper explanation, and of course, I'll be teaching you in such a way that if you have to make like other logics like recursive function logic, you can make that pretty easily. Anyway, what recursive function means is if I call this function inside of this function. This is what recursiveness means. Calling a function inside of that function. Now I obviously need to pass an int inside of it, like int a, but we're not going to do that. We're actually going to write the code for getting the factorial. Now imagine this int I is 1 or 0. Now if you don't know like basic maths, I think you should know that first. Anyway, if you want the factorial of either 0 or 1, it's going to be 1. So I'll check if I is equals to 0 or I is equals to 1, then do what? Then return 1. And that's all we have to do. We have handled the situation in which I is either 0 or it's 1. Now we're going to go into the else part. Now, you know, if the if part is not going to be true, then it's automatically going to go in the else part. So yeah, here the actual things come. Now here you have to type return I multiplied by factorial I minus 1. Now, I know this might be a little bit difficult for you to understand this statement right here, what it actually does. So what I've done is I've made a whiteboard presentation. I'm really excited to use this application because I haven't used it like ever. I don't know why I'm excited to use the application. Anyway, so I'm going to explain this code to you with the help of this whiteboard thingy I made. Um, First things first, we actually got to call this factorial function inside of the main function. Factorial 5 I have done. And according to, okay, because this function is returning a int type, we have to store its value into something. So I'm going to do int int answer is equals to this. Now this int answer is holding the value of this, holding the answer of this factorial 5. Now all we have to do is print it. Printf, and then I gotta do your answer is, and then percentile d, and then ans. Now I do expect you to like know this much, this basic C, how to get like numbers inside of string and stuff. So I expect you to know this. And I could have actually taken something like scanf, and I could have taken an input for this number right here, this 5. But I think I'll leave that to you because I think you should know how to take scan. Or maybe I will tell it to you. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna add a scan function as well. Printf and enter the number to get factorial off. And then we're just going to give it a little bit of space, so while we're entering the number, it's a little bit cool. Now in scanf, what do we want is an integer, so we'll write percentile d, then comma, and then where we have to put it, we got to make a new container, which will be int, and then the number. And I'm not going to define it, I'm not going to give it an initial value, I'm just going to write in number. And now I'm going to use a pointer and going to type number. Now it's not like I'm going to explain pointers in this video. Pointers are like way too big of a concept to explain a single video, so I'm not going to do that. I think you should know it. Anyway, now that we have taken an int number, this is just a container to keep the number, this number of which you want to get factorial of. Now what I'm doing is scanning the terminal to get the like input from user, and then give the user factorial of that input. Now we are taking int. I'm not doing any kind of error handling right now, so please don't mind that. Now I'm taking a integer input, and then asking for answer to this function 5. Now I am going to explain what this function actually, how it works. This function right here is the actual magic. I'm going to explain how it works, but before that, let's compile this thing and let's see if I have gotten any errors. So we'll do GCC and then main, and then I'll press tab, and then I'll compile it. It should not show me any errors. It takes quite a while to compile the C programs. I don't know why that is a thing. I'm going to do A, and then going to press tab. Then it should show me a.exe. A.exe did form. What's the problem? Yeah, it did. I don't know. Maybe my computer is acting a little bit slow. Anyway, so it's asking me enter the number to get factorial of. Now I'm going to type 5 because I know the factorial of 5, it's 120, and it'll be easy to explain it because the example I've taken is also a 5. So I'm going to do enter the number to get factorial of, and then I'm going to press 5, and I'm going to say enter. And your answer is 120. Now this answer is pretty much accurate, and this is the code. If you want it, you can just see and copy it. But now I'm going to explain how in the world does this code work. Now that we know that this code is working all great and fine, we are going to understand the concept of factorial, which doesn't changes with the language change. Okay, if the language changes, if you change from C to Java, only the syntax changes and nothing else. Anyway, let's get straight into it. Now here we know this is basic C. We have taken a input from the user, which is going to be the number of which we're going to return the factorial of. Now here we have a factorial function, which is an int function, so we can keep the value of int function inside of an int container. This is basic C, and then we are printing that value to the user with saying your answer is blah blah blah, whatever the answer is. Now if you see, when I typed 5 as a input, it gave me 120 as an answer, which means the code is working well and fine, which I already told you. I don't know why I'm repeating things. Now we are going to get into this factorial function. Now this factorial function says if I is equals to 0, or maybe if I is 1, return 1. I already told you this is because whenever you have to take factorial of 0 or 1, it's always 1. Now don't ask me how 0 factorial is equals to 1. I don't know that. I'm not a mathematician. Anyway, so this particularly says that I shouldn't be equals to 1 or 0, otherwise return 1, okay? Now here, you can see, let me just zoom in. We haven't put 1 as a parameter, okay? We have put 5. So this if is absolutely false. Then the control goes into else, and you should also know what a control is. I'm not going to explain that. I'm not going to explain everything from the basic. Anyway, so this else says that return the value of I multiplied by factorial of I minus 1. Now imagine the I initially was 5 as shown in this diagram. So it says factorial of 5 goes to 5 multiplied by factorial of 4, which you actually can see here. It should say return, because I was 5, it should say return 5 multiplied by factorial of 5 minus 1, which is 4. So it basically says factorial of 5 shall be 5 into factorial of 4, which is true mathematically as well. Now, now that we have called this function, inside of this function will recall itself. The control will go from here to here. Okay, this function will call itself. Now the value passed in is 4. So the function will come here and say, well, the value of I isn't 1 and it's not even 0, so I shouldn't return. Rather than that, I should go into the else part and say 4 multiplied by factorial of 3, as shown in the diagram. So first it came from factorial 5 into factorial 4. Then remember the program, this initial program. Now initially, we had called this function with a value of 5. So 5 went in, it called another function, said factorial of 4. Remember this function, this entire function hasn't returned yet, so it hasn't given a value to answer. Now here, you say factorial 5 goes to 5 into factorial 4, then this function goes back and says 4 into factorial of 3, as because of the logic we have set here. Then factorial 3 goes to 3 into factorial 2, and then factorial 2. Now following that pattern, the program finally comes to this point, which says 2 into factorial 1. And you know this point was to come at some point. Now, when we say factorial 1, 1 goes to in this function again, and this time the if statement is true. Now notice how we are not calling function again if I is 1. So here, the value will start returning. Now, 2 into 1 returns here and says 3 into 2, which will be 6. Then 6 will return here, which will then multiply with 4, will become 24. And then 24 will return here and will multiply with 5 and will become 120. And then the final value will go into this function, which is our final function right here. I'm going to explain once more. The function initially starts from factorial 5. Factorial 5 goes to 5 into factorial 4, as because we have called the function again, it goes back and then says if is not true, so we're going to go into else. It calls the function again with factorial 3, and then this pattern is followed until the limit, which is 2 into factorial 1, comes. And because we have put this if statement which says if the value of I is 1, then return 1, then this function starts to return. This function returns 1, then it multiplies with 2, becomes 2. Then this entire thingy returns to this place because this function called this thingy. So this entire thing is this function. This function returns, it becomes 2. Then 2 multiplies with 3. This 3 and then 2 multiplication 6 goes to this function. And then it multiplies with 4. And then this 4 goes here with multiplied by 6. And then it becomes 24. This thing becomes 24. And then it gets multiplied by 5. And finally, our answer is returned. Now, it's not about only 5. You could have written any number and you would have gotten the answer. And this is the logic through which the actual factorial thingy works. Now, I hope you did understand, and if you didn't, you can go back into the video and you can test it, and you can actually code side by side so you can understand better. Now, the C part is done. I am done coding in C. I'm going to close this file. Yes, save it, please. And then I am going to go into factorial.py. I promised you that I'm going to do this in each and every language I told you, like Python, JavaScript, C, and Java. Now that C is done, we are going to get into Python, which is the most loved language, I guess, now. Anyway, so I hope you know basic Python if you are at this timestamp. Anyway, we have defined the same kind of function. Now, let me show you a really interesting thing, which is how I idealize these things. Anyway, so as you can see, we jumped from one language to another language, but the logic didn't actually change. The logic is still same. We're defining a function called factorial. We're taking a int I. Here, we're not actually defining it because Python actually can do that for itself. Anyway, so here we say if I is equals to 0 or 1, then return 1. We're doing the same here. And in the else statement, we are saying return I multiplied by factorial of I. We are doing the same here. Now remember, factorial is not an inbuilt function in any kind of language. We're self-calling the function we made on our own. And by the logic I told you in the C part, you should know how to do it. And if you jumped straight into this Python part, please go into the C part. There should be a timestamp where I've written explain, in which I have explained all of this factorial thingy with a whiteboard. So please go and watch that. I'm just giving a summary in Python, okay? So that's why it's not going to be that deep. Anyway, so here I've defined the same function. In here, I am taking an input from the user saying enter the number you want to get factorial of. And then I'm calling this function called factorial with the number passed in. And then we can see it working. I'm going to type Python, then factorial.py, and then going to press enter. Enter your number, it will be 5, and the correct answer is 120. Now, getting into JavaScript. This is the time we get into JavaScript. Python and C are already done. Now in JavaScript, it's pretty basic because I'm not taking any kind of input because there are a lot of ways you can take input in JavaScript, and I don't really want to get into that. I don't really want to get into web development right now. Anyway, and I don't even want to use Node server, okay? For the people who will act smart in my comment section. Anyway, so I've defined the same function here. If you don't know about this function and you have jumped straight to JavaScript, then there is a timestamp in the description with the name called explain. At that time, I have explained what this factorial function, how it works with a proper whiteboard. So you should go and watch that before coming to the summary of JavaScript. Anyway, in this function, I have defined that you have to take an integer I and then check if it's 1 or 0. If it's 1 or 0, return 1. And else, return I multiplied by factorial of I, which will back call this function and will run in a loop that I have already told you about. Now here, I've just console logged that thing. So I'm just going to do node and then factorial.js, and it's going to give me a proper answer, 120. Now I haven't taken any input, that's why this is a hard-coded code. Anyway, now that we are done with JavaScript, C, Python, and all those languages, I'm going to come to my favorite language. And yes, I said favorite because I started with Java, like my journey started with Java, so it is like quite close to my heart. I did Java core for about 2.5 years, and I'm just giving you all this useless information just so you don't realize that my PC is so slow that it's loading Java really slowly. And yeah, anyway, we're finally in my Eclipse IDE, and we're gonna do factorial problem in Java as well. I'm gonna go into my factorial project real quick, and you should already know what all of this means if you have learned Java, of course. And if you still want to know the logic behind the factorial function itself, and if you have jumped straight to Java without actually learning the concept, you should go back to the timestamp. There is a timestamp in the description where I've said explain, and it will take you to the time where I've explained why this factorial function works in the first place with a whiteboard. So please go and watch this. And if you are watching my video like from the start to the beginning, you might be wondering why am I saying like this each and every time I start any language. That's because if someone might have jumped to a particular language, they should know that where I've explained the actual thing. Now I've done the same function, which is quite easy. Now I think by this time you should already remember it. And now I've done the same thing. I've taken an int I, then said return 1 if it's 1 or 0. And then in else, I've said return I multiplied by this function and then passed I minus 1. Now in here, I have simply taken I have made a scanner object. I have taken an input of type integer and then gotten an answer from factorial function giving that integer as an parameter, and then said here is your answer and then plus answer. I could have used percentile d here as well, but I didn't do it because yeah, I think I could do percentile d. I've not been into Java for such a long time. Anyway, I'm gonna run this code and it should probably not give me any errors. It didn't. Enter the number to get factorial of. Now I'm gonna type 5 because that's the only number I remember the factorial of right now. I mean, I know the factorial of 4, but come on. I'm gonna press enter and it gave me answer 120. Okay. So I think by this time you should know how it works, but I'm gonna explain it one more time for any of you who didn't understand it in the first place. Now you should know how the function works itself, right? I just need to tell you what is the logic behind it, right? So yeah, if you're already done, if you know how it works already, then you can leave the video and you can do like. If this video did help you, you can like. I'm just explaining for those people who didn't understand until now. Let my Microsoft whiteboard just load in. Anyway, so first we have given the factorial 5 function. It goes to this thingy which says 5 multiplied by factorial of 4. Now what factorial of 4 will do is the same thing this did. So you should see the pattern by now. When I do factorial 5, it does 5 multiplied by factorial of 5 minus 1. Now the pattern continues with this factorial 4. It says 4 multiplied by factorial 4 minus 1. And then this pattern continues until you come to factorial 1. Because factorial 1 is equals to 1, thus we return the value without any problem. And then this goes from here to here, multiplying with every stage. This factorial 1 returns 1. It multiplies with 2, becomes 2. 2 goes here, multiplies with 3, becomes 6. 6 goes here, multiplies with 4, becomes 24. 24 goes here, multiplies with 5, and then becomes the final answer, which is 120. I like how it smoothens out my touches because I'm on the mouse. Anyway, so that was all for this factorial video. I hope you did understood how to get in factorial. I showed you in 4 different languages, and if you could understand it, please drop a like. If you couldn't, you can comment down below. I would probably help you if you still couldn't understand it. Anyway, that was all for this video. If I helped you in any way, a like would be appreciated. And I also post a lot of courses here, like web dev courses, application building courses, C course, Java course. That will be coming in the future if you're watching this video too early. If you're watching this video like near the time of the release, then there's only one series on my YouTube channel, which is web dev course. But I'll be adding more courses, so if you're like interested in that, then you can just opt in by pressing that sub button down there. You can turn it into gray. Anyway, you should only do that if you like what I did, if you like my content in any way, and if you could understand what I said, then it will only matter. Anyway, that was all for this video. I'll meet you guys in the next episode. Till then, take care of yourself and family. And one more thing before I go, I have also taught you how to get like what do you call it, factorial, and yeah, Fibonacci series. I've also made a video on how to print Fibonacci series in 4 different languages: Java, JavaScript, Python, and C. So the video I've taught you how to print or get Fibonacci series printed it should be somewhere on the screen. So if you want to watch that, please click on that video and go there, watch that too. Give me more views helps, I guess. Anyway, that was all for this video. I'll meet you guys next time if you will stick with me, of course. Till then, take care of yourself and family. Silenx, signing off.